Election Day is almost here, and voters across Washington and Idaho will decide on several big issues and races.
I don't plan on changing any abortion laws when I get to Congress.
I am a big supporter of national security.
Before you fill out your ballot, we want to make sure you know more about the candidates you're voting for.
When I'm in Eastern Washington, I hear about three priorities. Number one, wildfires. Number two, wildfires. And number three, wildfires.
Eastern Washington, Central Washington, you don't have to explain to anybody the devastation of wildfire.
And what your vote means when it comes to statewide initiatives and measures.
This is the KREM 2 News Elections Guide.
Hello, and thank you for joining us on KREM 2 and KREM 2 Plus. I'm Mark Hanrahan.
And I'm Whitney Ward. In the next hour, we want to help you prepare for Election Day on Tuesday, November 5th.
Remember, you need to turn in your ballot by 8 p.m. on election night. If you're in Washington, you can mail it back or put it in a ballot drop box.
In Idaho, you will want to get to your polling place by 8 p.m. on election night.
There is a lot to vote on this ballot. We want to start with the race for Washington's 5th congressional district, which includes most of Eastern Washington.
Now, this seat is open for the first time in 20 years after the incumbent, Kathy McMorris Rogers, announced she is retiring. The two candidates are Michael Baumgartner and Carmela Conroy. They both sat down with KREM 2's Amanda Rowley to spill the tea about who they are and where they stand on the important issues.
Well, Michael, thank you for joining us for the tea with Amanda Rowley, so you can spill the tea on who you are. Happy to have you here.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah. So you are running for Washington's 5th congressional district. Right out the gate, we want to know, why are you deciding to run in this race?
Well, it's a great question. You know, my wife and I, we have 5 little kids, and not just for our kids, but for everyone's children. We're just very concerned about the future of our country.
Now, a really tough question for you, though. What type of tea did you decide to sip on?
Well, I am having a Buffalo green tea.
And then kind of looking at your experience career-wise, you're currently serving as Spokane County's treasurer and spent 8 years as a Washington State senator. What is your proudest accomplishment over the years as an elected official?
Probably my favorite bill that we ever worked on was when we created the new WSU Medical School. So it was kind of a strange deal.
It's a big deal for the community.
It was. If you look at both between the two schools, there are more graduates of medical education here in Spokane than there are out of Seattle. And boy, we need them.
So Michael, what is the #1 thing you would want to address as a congressman?
Well, I think the top issue facing our country right now is securing the southern border. What we need to do is kind of 3 things. One, we need to physically finish the border. Secondly, we need to return to the policy of what's called remain in Mexico or other countries where before someone steps foot in the U.S., if they claim to be a refugee, that is determined before they get to the U.S. And then here in the U.S., we need to implement something called E-Verify, which is a documentation to prove that you have legal status to work.
So there's a study found this year that nearly 1/3 or 31% of Gen Z are living with their parents because they can't afford to buy or rent a home. So what steps would you take in Congress to help these young adults who are struggling to leave the nest?
That's a great point. You know, I mean, when we talk about the American dream, I mean, I want my kids to be able to afford their own home. We need to make increase housing supply. So here in Washington State, constrict housing supply where houses can be built. Planning is important, but you need to have that availability in that supply.
I understand you are pro-life. Would you support a nationwide abortion ban?
Yeah, so I don't plan on changing any laws when I get to Congress. You know, when I read the Constitution, and I've sworn an oath to the Constitution in the past, it says clearly that issues that are not in the Constitution are reserved for the states.
I want to get you to spill the tea here, getting into piping hot tea territory. So what do you say to your opponent calling you a career politician?
Well, I'm not a career politician. I was in the private sector after I left Harvard and worked overseas. I actually left my private sector career to voluntarily go to Iraq. So that's okay. But, you know, one of the longest career politicians in Eastern Washington was Tom Foley, and he had a pretty good legacy.
Well, thank you so much, Michael Baumgartner, for joining me and spilling the tea on who you are and give voters a chance to get to know you better.
Well, I appreciate it. It's hopefully we can come back and have some more tea in the future.
Always, yeah. Well, good luck in the race.
Thank you.
Well, Carmela Conroy, thank you for joining me on The Tea with Amanda Rowley to spill the tea on who you are and help voters get to know you better.
Thanks for having me, Amanda. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, happy to have you. We're going to get to this tough stuff first. You got to tell me, what kind of tea are you deciding to drink today?
Well, Amanda, it's fall, and it's been feeling like fall, one of my favorite seasons here. And so I've got the orange cinnamon spice tea.
You're running for Washington's 5th Congressional District. Why did you decide to run for this race?
I've lived a life of public service, almost 30 years of apolitical public service, 4 years as a Spokane County Deputy Prosecutor, and then almost 25 years as a U.S. Foreign Service officer. I feel like because I've got the federal experience, that it is something that I can sort of return to my community.
So what is the most important thing you would want to tackle in Congress if you're elected?
Well, I think job one, if a farm bill doesn't pass before the end of the year, is getting that farm bill going. I think the farm bill is what ties all Americans together, whether they're urban folks or rural folks. We all have an interest. We all agree that no family should go to bed hungry.
What do you think needs to be done in Congress to address inflation?
Some of what we can do is make sure that we, for example, restore some tax fairness. I think when working people say that they feel like they're paying too much in taxes, I agree with that.
Spill the tea. Where do you stand on immigration policy?
I am a big supporter of national security, and that ensures making that our borders are safe. I was very disappointed to see that the bipartisan bill that apparently was primarily drafted by a conservative Republican senator from Oklahoma didn't make it to the White House for signature. Our country needs secure borders.
Where do you stand on abortion?
I believe that that should be a nationwide right, as it was up until 2022. They can't get those appointments in Idaho anymore, and so that means all of us, those of us who are nearest to our clinics in Eastern Washington, have to wait longer to be able to get in and see a specialist.
Is there anything that you could foresee doing within Congress to address that increase in demand?
Well, sure. It would be to reinstate nationally a woman's and a girl's and anybody's right to make private decisions about their own lives.
Your opponent claims that your policies do not fit Eastern Washington and its values. Spill the tea for me, Carmela. What do you say to that?
I gotta wonder who he's talking to. Because what I'm hearing is that people really do want our freedoms to be protected. We are independent Westerners. We don't want the government up in our business.
Well, thank you so much, Carmela, for talking through your experience and where you stand on things, giving folks an opportunity to learn more about you as their candidate.
I appreciate it. Yeah. Amanda, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Now we you to learn more about these candidates by watching the KREM 2 5th District Congressional Debate. It is the final time Ms. Conroy and Mr. Baumgartner will go head-to-head before the election. You can watch it streaming on KREM 2 Plus, and if you don't have KREM 2 Plus yet, download it now for free on Roku, Fire TV, and Apple TV.
Still ahead on KREM 2 News, in our elections guide, we are taking a closer look at some of the initiatives on the ballot in Washington, including an effort to repeal the state's Climate Commitment Act. We'll hear from the key people for and against the initiative.
Plus, Washington will have a new governor for the first time in more than a decade. Coming up, the candidates make their case for your vote and explain why a recent poll isn't the final word in this race.
Obviously, we're pleased with the poll results, but we take any poll with a grain of salt, right? But rather be ahead than behind.
I have to smile at the polls because I've been there, done that, been behind before, and come back and won.
Welcome back to the KREM 2 News Election Guide. This year, Washington voters will decide on 4 statewide initiatives.
2 of them deal with climate change and energy issues. Let's take a closer look at what a yes or no vote would mean.
Initiative 2066 would prohibit state and local governments from restricting access to natural gas. It would also prohibit the State Building Code Council from prohibiting, discouraging, or penalizing the use of natural gas in any building. The campaign was sponsored by the Building Industry Association of Washington, which says it protects the freedom of Washingtonians to have the clean energy of their choice. In March, the state of Washington passed a bill that prohibits any gas company with more than 500,000 customers from getting natural gas service if that service wasn't in place by 2023. A yes vote on Initiative 2066 means keeping the ability to use natural gas in the future. A no vote means eliminating that option for gas companies with more than 500,000 customers.
Initiative 2117 would repeal the Climate Commitment Act, a state law that provided for a cap and invest program designed to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 95%. Supporters say the tax is what's making Washington's price of living the highest in the nation alongside California. Opponents say the program is the true solution to lower transportation costs by getting the state off of fossil fuels. So, a yes vote on I-2117 means eliminating the Climate Commitment Act, while a no vote will keep it in place.
Climate policy on the ballot this November.
There's been a lot of dishonesty in how this thing was rolled out.
Brian Haywood of Let's Go Washington is the driving force behind Initiative 2117 to repeal the Climate Commitment Act.
2117 is so shocking, it's so extreme, it needs to be defeated.
Reuben Carlisle is the former state senator behind the initial legislation. The initiative would end the state's cap and trade or tax programs, which essentially charge top polluters for carbon emissions to help fund state programs. But Haywood argues this is all driving up gas prices through hidden taxes. Carlisle says there's no evidence of that. In nearly 2 years, the state has made $2 billion. Carlisle points to losses of more than $5 billion if they're repealed. Polls show that convincing voters to repeal the legislation has been challenging.
Those who want to repeal some of these acts by the legislature have not really done much of a job to explain why the actions of the legislature should be reversed.
It's expensive to get measures on the ballot, and they haven't had the same amount of resources to push for their passage.
Haywood has brushed off criticism for not having a solution to what he insists is broken.
If I wanted to go and make the program, I would run for office. And that's not what I'm doing right now. I'm fixing something that is hurting everybody.
The initiative process is an important part of our representative democracy, our constitutional republic. So I have no problem stepping up and having a real conversation with the public.
And Washington State's top office is also up for grabs. Coming up next, we sit down with the two candidates for governor. Hear their plans to make sure Eastern Washington isn't forgotten in Olympia. Plus,
Proposition 1 is really a way to go back to a more open system.
If this were to come into place, we would completely and radically change our entire election system.
And it is one of the most contentious issues on Idaho's ballot. We'll explain what your vote on Prop 1 could mean for the future of elections in Idaho. This election, Washington will decide on a new governor for the state.
voters will choose between Democrat Bob Ferguson and Republican Dave Reichert.
Just a few weeks before the election, a poll from King 5, the Seattle Times, and the UW Center for an Informed Public showed Ferguson with a big lead, but also 16% of voters still undecided.
KREM 2's chief journalist Amanda Rowley pressed both candidates on those poll numbers, as well as issues important to Eastern Washington.
Obviously, we're pleased with the poll results, but we take any poll with a grain of salt, right? But rather be ahead than behind.
Come the election day, hopefully, millions of voters have spoken. And that's really the important poll, right?
Still, 16% of respondents remain undecided about the race for Washington's governor. Both candidates shared what they think is the most critical difference between them.
We can bring Washingtonians together. There's an opportunity here for us to have a moderate Republican governor who can work with a Democrat House and a Democrat Senate.
We're facing many challenges as a state. We need someone who can come into the governor's office and be a change agent to make improvements on public safety, homelessness, affordability, but at the same time defending our core freedoms.
How would you plan to engage with Eastern Washington residents?
You know, just like I was the sheriff for all of King County, I will be, as I was the congressman for all of the 8th district, I will be the governor for everyone in Washington state.
Does that come in the form of more often visits to Eastern Washington?
Yeah, I think you got to.
Like?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you have to. It's not just visits, but you have to listen to people.
First of all, I've lived and worked on both sides of the mountains. Number two, when I launched my campaign, I literally launched it in Spokane. My second stop was the Tri-Cities. Only then did I come to the west side of the mountains. So I'm trying to communicate throughout my time as Attorney General and standing up for all Washingtonians, and in my campaign for governor, I plan to be governor for all Washingtonians.
Following Spokane County's 2 massive wildfires last year, homeowners have criticized the state's response. Ferguson says the state is doing better, but there's room for improvement.
I think we would all agree more needs to be done, in particular with victims, folks who are harmed. There's a human toll to what happens when it comes to fires. As a governor, we'll make sure we're helping those folks out.
Reichert believes the state should be doing more. He plans to make a deliberate and immediate effort to help wildfire victims.
We've got to get immediate assistance. It's an emergency management plan that should be in place that ensures that people get the help they need as soon as possible.
Now, as for Washington state's gun laws, Ferguson maintains his support for banning the sale of assault-style weapons and what the state considers high-capacity magazines. Reichert doesn't believe those laws make a difference in the amount of gun crime in the state. Amanda Rowley, KREM 2 News.
And still ahead, should Washington state's long-term care benefit be optional? We'll take a look at both sides of Initiative 2124 before you cast your vote.
And an Idaho proposition could change the way the state votes. We'll break down what a yes or no vote means on Prop 1. Welcome back to our KREM 2 News Elections Guide. In Idaho, voters will decide on 2 statewide issues this year.
If passed, both of them could change the rules on voting in the state.
The Idaho Citizen Requirement for Voting Amendment would amend the Idaho Constitution to require a person to be a U.S. citizen in order to vote in elections in Idaho. Currently, Idaho law prohibits non-citizens from voting or registering to vote in the state for any state or local elections. In 1996, the U.S. Congress passed a law prohibiting non-citizens from voting in federal elections, including elections for the U.S. House, U.S. Senate, and presidential elections. This does not apply to elections at state and local levels. 16 municipalities across the country allowed non-citizens to vote in local elections as of December 2023. 11 were located in Maryland, 3 in Vermont, and 2 in California.
The initiative Proposition 1 would repeal the state's partisan primary system and replace it with a top 4 primary system where all candidates seeking that office appear on one ballot and the top 4 vote earners advance to the general election. Candidates would be able to list their party affiliation, but it would not mean they represent the party. Candidates would also not be required to list party affiliation. This primary system would be used at elections for the U.S. Senate, the U.S. House of Representatives, state legislature, elective state office, and county elective office. Supporters say every registered voter should have the right to vote in a primary, not just those who identify as Republican or Democrat. Opponents say replacing the system with the top 4 primary is overly complicated and unnecessary. They claim all that's needed for independent voters to have a voice is to change the primary system to an open one.
Supporters of Idaho's Proposition 1 say the ranked choice vote system will broaden voter access to participate in elections.
A major benefit of Proposition 1 and the top 4 open primary is that voters would be able to, vote for the person and not always the party. So they could choose to support the Republican they really like for the governor's race. They could choose to support an independent in their local legislature.
But those who oppose the initiative believe the current election system should remain in place because it is clear and transparent.
Right now, we have a system that is very fair because we have guaranteed ballot access for 4 political parties and independent voters. This completely tosses that notion out.
In Coeur d'Alene, Amanda Rowley, KREM 2 News.
Coming up next, as Washington voters decide on a new public lands commissioner, I sat down with both candidates to hear about their plans to prioritize wildfires in eastern Washington.
What we're living in and seeing are unnatural, catastrophic fires.
These aren't, I don't think, Western Washington or Eastern Washington issues.
On this KREM 2 News Election Guide special, we are breaking down the issues and people you are voting on this November.
One of the jobs up for grabs is Washington's Public Lands Commissioner. I sat down with each of the candidates to talk about their plans to specifically protect eastern Washington from wildfires.
Eastern Washington, Central Washington, you don't have to explain to anybody the devastation of wildfire.
My agenda is pretty simple. Number one, I want to, protect our clean air, clean water, and habitat.
What would you say are your biggest Eastern Washington priorities?
When I'm in Eastern Washington, I hear about three priorities. Number one, wildfires. Number two, wildfires. And number three, wildfires. We've got to continue to improve our work preventing wildfires. And this means doing more things like thinning, both commercial and non-commercial, prescribed burns in partnership with the community. And it also means continuing to improve our response and our recovery.
Making sure that we can suppress those fires when they start and as quickly as possible. But I want to continue the upland work of prevention. And that goes hat in hand with this. If you do one and not the other, you're just setting yourself up for failure. And my opponent right now is talking about taking land off the rolls in Western Washington. So he would say it doesn't impact our firefighting ability. It directly impacts it, because if you take $2 billion worth of inventory off the rolls in Western Washington, that you better believe that's going to impact our ability to fight fires and do the upland work in Eastern and Central Washington.
So we've already done 800,000 acres. It's been tremendous. In the places where that thinning and that work has been done, it has made a difference, but it's really a drop in the bucket when it comes to how much forest land we really do have. How do you do enough to make a difference?
That's a great question, and you're exactly right. So I want to also do some of that forest health work using federal money on some of the federal lands, because it's going to complement forest health priorities that we're doing and putting in place in Washington State on the trust lands.
We need to be strategic in pursuing federal funds. I'd like to actually designate a staff member in the Department of Natural Resources to work on federal government relations. I think we would get our money's worth. We also need to keep making the case to the state legislature.
How do you convince lawmakers how important it is to do the prescribed burning, the thinning, and the logging even?
Yep. There's three ways. One is the department generates revenue through our work. When we lease these lands for agriculture, we generate money. And then I think it's a matter of continuing to make the case that these investments in wildfire prevention are a good investment. They're good for public safety, they're good for our environment, and they save us money in the long run. We've seen, in the Spokane area, we've seen far too many times the cost of not adequately addressing in prevention. And, when we do it right, it works.
Proving to them that current science, is what we need to follow. It shouldn't be partisan. I don't even think this office should be partisan. Personally, I think it should be about getting results. So the message to them is, let's do this. Let's fight climate change. Let's do it by keeping our forests doing what they do best. They're carbon storage workhorses. If they're healthy, let's keep them healthy.
How do you balance the needs of Western Washington and Eastern Washington, knowing that they are very different?
One of the things I've found as I've traveled the state is, and I've been at this for a year now in small towns and rural communities, is a lot of the values and needs aren't as different as we think. Everyone values clean air and clean water. I think we all, whether you're in Eastern Washington or Western Washington, value recreation, whether it's horseback riding, hunting, fishing, backpacking, and these are universal.
We are a resource-rich state. We are amazing, actually. And we've been just beaten into this corner to think, oh, don't use it. That's how you protect it. But that's not true. The science around a well-managed piece of DNR land sequesters over 11 metric tons of carbon. That is more than any of the carbon projects that anyone has talked about so far in the state. So if we turn our forests into these carbon workforces, oh my goodness, we can do it. And that's the balance to me, is getting beyond the politics of this.
What do you say to people here in Eastern Washington who feel like their needs and their concerns are often forgotten from state office holders?
I think it's true. I agree. You need someone who's willing to value everyone on the same playing field. And that's something I have done. I think that perspective needs to be at the helm. If you're leading a 2,000 plus person agency, which is what this executive does, you need to have those perspectives on problem solving and working across the aisle and understand who your bosses are. They are the people of the state of Washington.
What is your message specifically to voters here in Eastern Washington?
I understand how important it is to meet our responsibility to keep these communities safe. My commitment is to follow the science, to be an independent-minded voice, to work in a bipartisan manner to address the wildfire challenges in Eastern Washington.
And you can watch my full extended interviews with both of those candidates right now on KREM 2+. If you're currently watching us on KREM 2+, just navigate to the top menu bar, select News, and then scroll down to find Politics Plus.
All right, coming up next, Washington voters will decide on the future of the state's long-term care program. We'll hear from both sides about what they say are the pros and cons of the Washington Cares Fund.
The language has become, frankly, horrific.
We are here to love. We are here to support.
And they may not agree on politics, but they still have a shared property line still ahead. Their lesson in being neighborly regardless of who you're voting for.
Welcome back to the KREM 2 News Election Guide Special. I'm Whitney Ward.
I'm Mark Hanrahan. We now want to take a closer look at the final two initiatives on the ballot in Washington.
One would bring changes to the state's long-term care program, while the other affects a capital gains tax.
Initiative 2109 would repeal the 7% capital gains tax that comes with the sale of assets like stocks, bonds, or business interests with capital gains of more than $250,000. Supporters say the tax is a kind of income tax and that Washington has a long tradition prohibiting state income tax. But opponents say repealing this initiative would take billions of dollars away from childcare and education programs over the next several years. They say the law only affected 4,000 people in all of Washington last year. So, this election day, voting yes on I-2109 will get rid of the tax, and a no vote will keep the current funding measure in place.
Initiative 2124 would allow employees and self-directed workers to opt out of coverage under WA Cares, the state's long-term health care program. That program is paid for by a mandatory payroll tax and provides long-term health services, such as home health care or nursing home care, to qualifying individuals. Supporters say workers should have the choice to opt out of the program and may find private long-term care insurance a better deal. Opponents say millions of working Washingtonians are counting on the fund to pay for their care in case of injury, illness, or age, and voting yes would essentially repeal the program.
Kathy McCall recently moved in with her 87-year-old mom who has dementia. She's one of the 820,000 unpaid family caregivers in our state.
She has, challenges doing the basic things like making a sandwich or remembering what she was doing.
As the advocacy director for AARP Washington, she says 70% of us will need long-term care, something health insurance and Medicare won't cover. That's why AARP is among the more than 140 organizations fighting to protect WA Cares Fund.
7% of the population can actually afford long-term care. And so this program provides for middle-income families and for families that struggle to think how they're going to care for a loved one as they age or if they have a disability.
In July of last year, workers in Washington began paying 58 cents for every $100 they earn to WA Cares. People can receive up to $36,500 to pay for services like in-home care to help with cooking, bathing, or getting around the house. Benefits will be available after contributing for 10 years or 3 out of the last 6 years if you have a sudden need. People already close to retirement would get partial benefits. Workers had a small window to opt out, and nearly 500,000 people did by getting their own private insurance.
But if you look at who opted out, it was anybody that worked in a corporation that had a on-the-ball HR department that could help them get out. But that meant welders and gas station attendants and waitresses and anybody sort of in the service industry without that infrastructure is stuck in the program.
Brian Haywood with Let's Go Washington, which is behind Initiative 2124, believes voters should have a choice. Voting yes would end mandatory participation in the program, which he says hurts disabled workers who can't work enough hours to benefit, and women in particular.
If you're a woman and you graduate from college and you work for 9 years, you got to work 10. If you only work for 9, and you stop to raise a family for 5 years, you have to go back to ground zero and work another 10 years.
All of us, family caregivers.
But opponents of I-2124 argue the initiative actually hurts women because many leave their jobs to care for loved ones. And making WA Cares optional will essentially kill the program.
This is not about an opt-out. It's not about choice. And in fact, they're taking away people's choices, their choice to determine how they want to use this long-term care benefit.
Now still ahead as voters get ready to choose a new representative for Washington's 5th Congressional District. We're sitting down with outgoing Congresswoman Cathy McMorris Rodgers for an exclusive interview. What are you most proud of?
Oh, it's hard to nail down one thing, but I hope that people see me as a representative that they can trust and that cared.
Now it feels like voters will hear why she decided to step away and what she says will be the biggest challenge for whoever takes over her seat. One of the most watched races in eastern Washington this year is for the 5th Congressional District.
Voters will decide between Republican Michael Baumgartner and Democrat Carmela Conroy. It'll be the first time in 2 decades the district has had a new representative.
It comes as Congresswoman Cathy McMorris Rodgers is stepping down after a historic career in Washington, D.C. I sat down with her to talk about her 20 years as a lawmaker and the issues facing the district's new representative.
I'm really proud of what I've been able to accomplish on behalf of the people of Eastern Washington.
Why did you decide now was the time to step away? What made you decide not to seek re-election?
Yes, well, it was a tough decision, and there had been other times when I had considered not running for re-election. I never imagined that I would serve in Congress as long as I have, and there was going to be a new era in Washington, D.C., and I thought, you know what, this is just a good time for me to come home.
What are you most proud of?
Oh, it's hard to nail down one thing, but I hope that people see me as a representative that they can trust and that cared.
Politics has changed a lot in 20 years. Right now, it feels like voters on both sides share a lot of frustration. What is your message to voters here in Eastern Washington?
My message to them is that our form of government is unique in all the world. The United States, that leadership matters, American leadership matters. I want them to believe in the amazing institution of Congress, and this is it's especially important in representative government that they vote and that they make their voice heard, and never underestimate the power of a few people to make a difference.
What do you think moving forward will be the biggest challenges for the next person that holds this seat?
Oh, I think it's just going to be the challenges of making sure that they listen to the people and learn these issues and take them back and serve the House of Representatives. I do remember when I was first sworn in.
Thank you, Eastern Washington. It is my honor to represent all of you.
And I looked over, across the House, and you're looking at 435 people, and just the reality of, okay, this is a lot of people to get to know. So you're building relationships, and that takes time. So that's one of the challenges. And then this is one of the largest districts in America. So traveling this district and getting to know people, but relationships are going to be most important for whoever serves in this position, both here in Eastern Washington and in D.C.
What's next for you? Where will we find you in January?
In January, I'm going to be home in Spokane, Washington. More present with my kids and my family, probably helping take the kids to all their activities.
What do you think that you will do? What's the next step for you?
Right. I'm still exploring what that looks like. There's a lot of different options, but it's going to mean I want to be here in Spokane and want to be involved in continuing to make a difference. My heart's full with gratitude for me. It's been just an amazing journey to think, going from Kettle Falls, Washington as a farm kid, working alongside my brother and parents on our orchard and fruit stand, to serving in Congress all these years. It's just been an extraordinary experience, an honor for me to serve and represent the good people of Eastern Washington. And I cherish these years, and I'm very proud to have had this honor to serve.
And remember, you can learn more about the candidates seeking to become the new 5th District representative right now on KREM 2+. Download our free app to watch the final debate between Carmela Conroy and Michael Baumgartner. KREM 2+ is our new streaming app that you can watch on your TV. It's available to download right now on Roku, Fire TV, and Apple TV.
Now coming up next, they share a property line, but not the same political views.
Hear how these neighbors remain friends during a divided election season.
Well, before we wrap up this election special, we want to introduce you to a pair of Spokane neighbors.
They have different political views, but as KREM 2's Tim Pham shows us, it doesn't mean they can't stay neighborly.
Bright orange and yellow leaves are signs of a new season. This time of year, you'll also find the colors red, white, and blue. Banners, flags, and the iconic political yard sign. You can't avoid them, just like you can't avoid your neighbor.
Hello, I'm Anita Sather, and I'm voting Democrat for the people.
I'm Cheryl McGrath, and I'm voting for conservative Republicans.
They may not share political beliefs, but they do share a property line. So I asked them to meet me in the middle for a conversation.
You have Harris wall signs. Why are you voting for Vice President Harris?
I believe that she supports loving everyone, having everyone get an equal chance.
Tell us why you are voting for former President Donald Trump.
I'm voting for former President Donald Trump because I do believe, again, that his policies strengthened America.
It's neighbor versus neighbor, or so you would think.
She's been really a blessing to me. You know, you have rough times, and I know I can always go over to Cheryl's house.
I think one of the most beautiful things about her is her heart. Even more than that is that she and I look different, we vote different, and we drink different wine.
We have quite an amount of honking and four-letter words outside of our house. Some for Cheryl, some for me.
We do bigger and better signs. That's how we jest.
You just wait, lady. You just wait. No, that was for Trump, right?
They can laugh about the noise and choose another four-letter word, love.
Yeah, we're confusing them to death.
We're confusing everybody.
Like,
what are they doing? I hear a lot of, oh my gosh.
I do too.
Can you even talk to her?
How can you be neighbors with a Trump supporter?
I know. Same here.
And how do we answer that?
I love my neighbor.
I love my neighbor. And I think they have a really hard time understanding that.
Back in the day, it feels like, you know, you voted for who you voted for, but you could still get along.
We just outsign each other.
Exactly what I was going to say.
Each other.
If I see a sign going up, okay, I'll go buy another sign.
We are better because of our differences, and whether we vote differently or not, we still love each other.
Reporting in Spokane,
I love you.
Tim Pham, KREM 2 News.
And thank you for joining us for this KREM 2 News Election Guide Special.
If you have more questions about your ballot, we have more interviews and explainers available to watch right now on KREM 2 Plus. You can download it for free on Roku, Fire TV, and Apple TV. You can also just text the word VOTE to 509-448-2000, and we will text you a link to our comprehensive voter's guide, and there you will find everything you need to know before casting your ballot.
If you need to check the status of your ballot or confirm your voter registration, you can do so in Washington by visiting votewa.gov. And be sure to join us on election night. We'll be live exclusively on KREM 2 Plus right after the polls close, bringing you the latest results from Washington and Idaho. I'm Mark Hanrahan.
Whitney Ward, don't forget to vote by Tuesday, November 5th.